The phone didn't ring today. It didn't ring yesterday either. I used to think that silence was peaceful, but now I realize there's a kind of silence that scrapes against your ribs like cold wind through an old window frame. You hear it even when there's nothing to hear. This morning I made tea and set it down next to the phone, just like I used to when they'd call and I'd settle in for a long talk. I even poured a second cup by habit more than hope. It went cold beside mine, untouched. I stared at the steam fading and thought about all the mornings that phone used to ring, before the water even boiled one of them with a broken heart, another overwhelmed at work, another needing help with the kids. My voice was the first thing they sought. Now it's not even an afterthought. I never asked for much. Not a parade, not grand gratitude, just a call, just a voice saying, "Hi, I was thinking about you." It used to be so constant that I barely noticed it. They would cry to me, whisper secrets into the receiver, call me 3 times a day if things were especially chaotic. Back then, I thought it would always be like that I was indispensable. But now, the only sound from that corner of the room is the ticking of the old clock on the wall, the one that's always been a little too loud, but now feels like company. I tried to justify it at first. They must be busy. Life is hectic. Everyone's tired. But how many days in a row can someone be too tired to remember the person who once stayed up all night beside their fevered brow? I didn't expect to become irrelevant. Not this quietly, not this completely. One day the phone just stopped ringing as much, then less, then not at all. And I didn't say anything. I just kept pouring 2 cups of tea. There's something cruel about becoming optional in the lives you once considered your mission. I remember holding each of them in my arms, feeling their breath on my neck, brushing their hair from sweaty foreheads. I was once their shelter. Now I'm a number in their phone they scroll past, probably thinking I'll call her later, and then they don't. The other day I picked up the phone just to hear if the dial tone still worked. It did. That steady hum felt like a heartbeat in a body no longer loved. I put the receiver back down gently, like I didn't want to disturb the ghosts of all the conversations we used to have. I sat there for a long while, teacup warm in my hand, eyes on the wall, where the paint is peeling just slightly in the corner. Something else no one visits often enough to notice. And you know what's strange? I still defend them even in my mind. They have their own lives, I whisper to myself. They don't mean to forget. They'll call tomorrow. I tell myself this like a bedtime story, one I've grown too old to believe, but can't bear to stop telling. Because if I stop, then I have to face what's really happened. I was once the one they cried to, the one they needed, the one they trusted, with the softest parts of themselves, and now I'm just a number they won't call. I didn't realize how much of my identity was tied up in being needed. It's a quiet unraveling, becoming invisible. It doesn't happen with a bang, it happens in small absences. In birthdays missed, in texts unread, in holidays with no place set for you, in teacups poured for 2 that go cold beside you. I sip slowly and listen to the emptiness. It has a voice now, a low, familiar hum, and it tells me everything I don't want to hear. I used to think love meant always being there, always picking up, always saying yes. But now I wonder, what does love become when no one picks up for you? When no one says yes back? I didn't ask for their love to stay the same. I just hoped it would still exist, still flicker at least, even if dimly. But here I am staring at a phone that hasn't rung in weeks, wondering how I became a memory they haven't realized they've forgotten. And still I pour the tea. Still I wait. Still I wonder if today might be the day someone remembers. The couch cushion still dips on the left side where they used to curl up against me, tiny knees drawn to their chest, heads tucked under my chin like baby birds hiding from the storm. Back then, they needed a place to land, and somehow I became that place without even realizing it. I didn't know that my lap had healing power. I didn't know that just the rhythm of my breathing could slow theirs. I didn't know that being there calm in the chaos would one day be a memory so distant it would ache to remember it. They used to cry for me, not just cry around me, cry for me. I want Mom. They'd say even when someone else offered to help. She knows how to fix it. That used to be my entire world, to be the one who knew how to fix it. A scraped knee, a broken toy, a bruised ego, a shattered dream. I didn't always have the answers, but I had arms that knew how to hold, and somehow that was enough. One of them once told me during a heartbreak that shattered her like glass, that she didn't think she could breathe unless I stayed on the phone with her. So I did, for hours, until the sun came up and the pain softened enough to let her sleep. I didn't even feel tired. I just felt needed, anchored, whole. But now the couch stays untouched. The cushions have puffed back up. The old woven blanket I used to wrap around them lies folded untouched for months. It's as if all the warmth in that room packed itself away when they stopped needing me. The space still remembers them, even if they don't seem to remember me. I've come to realize that being needed and being loved are not always the same. They once needed me so urgently, and I mistook that urgency for permanence. I didn't consider that one day they'd learn to walk through their storms alone, or worse, with someone else guiding them, and that I would become a relic of their past too heavy to carry into their future. I try not to resent it. I really do. I raised them to be strong, to be self-sufficient, to face the world with open eyes and steady feet. But I never imagined I'd teach them so well that they'd leave me behind like a used umbrella no longer needed, now that the rain has stopped. There was a day not long ago when I heard a car pull up, and for one dizzying moment, I hoped it might be one of them, that maybe they just needed to sit and talk the way we used to. Maybe something hurt, and they remembered that I was the one who always knew how to make the hurting stop. But it was a delivery truck, wrong address, and my lap remained empty, my arms still waiting. You know, there's an ache that comes not from what was done to you, but from what's no longer asked of you. The ache of not being turned to, the ache of being passed over. When they were small, I used to dream of the day they wouldn't need me so much, when I could sleep through the night, eat a meal while it was still warm, use the bathroom without interruption. But now I'd trade every minute of peace for 1 hour of that kind of need, of someone running into the room crying my name, sure that I could make everything okay again. I used to carry their pain like it was my own, and in a way it was. Their sadness spilled into me, and I drank it willingly just to make them feel lighter. Now the only weight I carry is silence, and it's heavier than I ever imagined. Heavier because it's mine, alone. There are no more whispered confessions under blankets, no more breathless voices saying, "Please don't tell anyone else, Mom, but I have to tell you." I was their confessional, their safe space, their sacred place. And now I'm a shadow in a quiet house with too many chairs and not enough reasons to sit in them. Sometimes I wonder if they've found someone else to cry to, a partner, a friend, a stranger online, someone who doesn't know what their voice sounded like when they were 6 and scared of the dark, someone who doesn't know how they used to hold my hand in their sleep, and it makes me feel foolish, how easily I was replaced, how quickly the world found new ears for their tears, while mine remain aching to hear them. I used to believe that love looked like showing up, like being there again and again, no matter what. I was proud of how steadfast I was, how reliable, how I never let them fall without rushing in to catch them. But now I wonder, did I teach them to lean too easily without ever showing them how to look back? Did I give them everything except a reason to remember I needed something too? And maybe that's the quiet heartbreak of motherhood being the foundation they build their lives on, only to be buried beneath the very homes you helped them create. Still, I sit on the couch sometimes and lay the old blanket across my lap just to remember, just to feel what it was like when they would crawl into the crook of my arm and truly believe, that I was the answer to all their broken pieces. I wasn't, but I tried, and in trying I gave them all the pieces of me. Now I just wonder if they even remember where they came from. I didn't tell anyone it was my birthday this year, not because I wanted to test them, not because I was playing some quiet game of emotional hide and seek, but because I was tired of the disappointment, tired of hoping the phone might ring or the doorbell might chime only to be met with silence. So still it hummed in my ears. I woke up, made my tea like always, and whispered happy birthday to myself, in the reflection of the kettle, the only face looking back at me that day. There was a time when they would plan little surprises, handmade cards when they were young, scribbled with crayon hearts and smeared with glue. In their teenage years, they'd pool together what little money they had to buy me a single rose or a favorite candle. And once years ago, they organized a small lunch at home. Nothing fancy, just laughter, a cake, and their presence. That day I felt seen. I didn't need more than that. I still don't. But even those small things have faded into the background now, like a photograph left too long in the sun. I'm not even sure if they remember what day it is. I spent the afternoon folding laundry and watching the light move slowly across the floorboards. Time has a way of dragging when it's empty. I baked myself a small cake, half out of habit and half out of rebellion. I even put a candle in it. One candle, just one. I didn't light it. I couldn't. Something about the act of lighting it just to blow it out alone felt too sad, too final. I sat at the table and looked out the window while the cake cooled. A car passed by someone else's daughter, dropping off groceries, I imagined. A neighbor's child visiting for the weekend. I let myself pretend for a moment that the car was slowing for my house, that someone was coming, that the gate would creak, and I'd hear footsteps. But no one came. The gate stayed still. The silence stayed steady. That night I ate a slice of the cake with a cup of tea and pretended it was just a regular day. I told myself it was better this way, that lowering expectations meant less pain. But that's not how it works, is it? The pain doesn't disappear when you expect less. It just settles, deeper, becomes quieter, harder to explain. No one asks, did anyone remember your birthday, because they assume, of course, someone must have. Who wouldn't remember their mother's birthday? But they didn't, and I didn't remind them. I could have sent a gentle hint, could have said something a week before, but I didn't, because I needed to know not whether they cared, but whether they would care without prompting, whether love still lived in them without my voice guiding it out. The answer came in the form of silence. No calls, no messages, not even a delayed "oh no, I forgot" nothing. It was like the day didn't exist at all, like I didn't exist at all. I know people forget things. I know calendars get cluttered and lives get busy. But birthdays aren't just about the date. They're about remembrance, about taking a moment to say, I'm glad you were born. And when the people you gave life to forget the day you came into the world, it feels like being erased in reverse. That night I stood in front of the mirror and looked at my face the one time etched across in soft lines and silver hair. I whispered happy birthday again, softer this time. It didn't feel like a celebration. It felt like a funeral for the kind of love I used to believe in. You know what's strange? I didn't cry. I thought I would. I thought I'd curl up on the couch with that uneaten half of cake and sob into the crumbs. But I didn't. I just sat, still, quiet, numb in a way that didn't need tears, only breath, only awareness. I'm learning that being forgotten doesn't always come with drama or confrontation. Sometimes it comes like this: a quiet birthday, an untouched candle a day that passes like any other except that it shouldn't have. And when no one notices, you start to wonder if maybe they never really saw you at all, or maybe they did once and just stopped looking. I cleaned up the dishes that night, wrapped the rest of the cake in foil, and placed it gently in the fridge. The next day, I offered a slice to the mail carrier. He smiled, thanked me, said, "This is a nice surprise." And in that moment it hit me a stranger had acknowledged me more than my own children had. And so I sit here now, days later, remembering that moment, not because it hurt the most, but because it clarified the quiet truth I've been avoiding. I am no longer their celebration. I'm their convenience when needed, their background noise, a name they know by heart, but no longer speak with tenderness. I didn't tell them it was my birthday, but I'm starting to realize it was never really about the birthday. It was about the remembering, and I've been slowly erased one forgotten moment at a time. There's a shelf in my hallway where I keep the old photo frames. Dust gathers there now, not because I don't care, but because I don't walk past them much anymore. It hurts in a quiet, dull way to see the faces frozen in time, smiling, clinging to me, eyes lit up with trust. There's one of us on the front porch, my arms wrapped around all of them, laughter caught mid-motion. It used to be their favorite. They used to joke about how I always insisted on one more photo, how I made them line up in matching sweaters for winter cards, how I cried every time one turned out blurry. Now they don't even ask to see them. I don't think they even remember most of the moments I tried so hard to preserve. Their homes have photos, too, I'm sure posed pristine digital, but none of me, at least none that I've seen. I noticed it the first time I visited one of their apartments. My picture wasn't anywhere, not on the wall, not on the fridge, not even tucked into a bookcase. It felt like walking into someone else's life and realizing you were never written into the script. I tried not to let it sink too deep. I told myself it was a modern thing. No one frames photos anymore. Everything's on phones now. But even their phones, when they flip through them, are filled with their lives, their children, their dinners, their trips. I watch over their shoulders, smiling politely, pretending I'm not scanning for any trace of me. I rarely find one. Back when they were young, they'd argue over whose drawing of me went on the fridge. Mine looks more like her, one would say, holding up a stick figure with big hair and heart-shaped eyes. I saved all of them drawings cards, handprints and paint, tucked away in old biscuit tins under the bed. Proof that once I mattered in color, that once they saw me clearly. I pulled one out last week just to hold it. The paper had yellowed edges curling slightly, but the crayon lines were still bright. To the best mom in the world, it read in messy handwriting letters too big for the page. I held it in my lap and whispered, "Do you still believe that though no one was there to answer?" I never needed them to worship me. I never even needed constant thanks, just remembrance. A sign that I wasn't a phase, that I hadn't been boxed up and stored like old holiday decorations taken out once in a while when convenient or nostalgic. It's hard to describe the ache of being erased while still breathing, of walking around a world you helped build and seeing no trace of yourself in it. I know who I am. I know what I gave. But when no one reflects that back to you, when your presence no longer registers, even in the spaces you once filled, you start to question if maybe you only imagined being loved. I've stopped offering to take photos at gatherings. I used to bring my little camera everywhere. I'd corral everyone into smiling just one more time, promising it'd be worth it. Now, I stay seated. Let someone else hold the camera. No one asks me to join in the frame anymore. I'm the one behind it or beside it, or more often than not, completely out of sight. And it's strange how they can look so much like me, and yet act as if I were never there. My features live on in their faces, my laugh echoes faintly in their jokes, but they carry no memory of the hands that shaped them. I want to believe they still love me. I truly do. But sometimes love isn't about the words, it's about the gestures, the space someone gives you in their life. And lately, I've become very small in theirs. I rearranged the photo shelf last week, not to tidy it, really just to touch the frames, to feel connected to something, even if only through glass. I whispered little memories to each one. That was your 7th birthday. You were so happy about the dinosaur cake. This was the trip to the lake. Remember how it rained, and we all squeezed under one umbrella? The photos didn't answer, but they listened better than anyone else these days. I keep them there, not just for nostalgia, but for proof. Proof that once I was central. I was chosen. I was the one they ran to, smiled at, held tight. The woman in those pictures was important. And even if no one frames me anymore, even if I'm no longer the center of anyone's camera roll, I won't let her disappear. One day they might go through my things. They'll find those frames, those albums, those yellowed cards. Maybe they'll cry. Maybe they'll regret. Or maybe they'll just shrug, say, she was sentimental, and toss them in a box. I try not to think about that. I try to believe that one day they'll wish they had looked a little longer at the woman in the photo, that they'll wish they had called her, asked her to smile again, let her know she was still worth remembering. But for now I sit with these frames, dust them when I can, and remind myself I was there. I loved. I mattered. I found out through a neighbor, not through a phone call, not even a message. Just an offhand comment while we were both out watering our plants, our hoses trailing like lifelines across the dry earth. She said she'd seen one of my children at the hospital rushing through the lobby, face pale, voice urgent. She assumed I already knew. Of course she did. I smiled and nodded, pretended I was already aware, my insides crumbling like a poorly stacked pile of old letters. That's how I found out that one of them had been sick, something serious enough to require an emergency visit tests, waiting rooms, and I hadn't known. I hadn't even been an afterthought. I walked back inside and closed the door gently behind me. Then I leaned against it, staring at the scuffed floor, the place where their school shoes used to pile up in messy heaps. That same floor now sat bare quiet, holding only the faint ghost of their younger days. I slid down and sat there, knees drawn up like a child, wondering when exactly I stopped being someone they told things to. Not just big things, any things. It wasn't always like this. There was a time when a scraped elbow warranted a dramatic retelling, when every new haircut came with a video call to get my opinion, when I was the first person they texted from the waiting room. "Pray for me, Mom," one used to say. "It's probably nothing, but I'm scared," and I would drop everything, every dish, every errand, every thought, and be fully present for them. Now it seems I am no longer the place they bring their fears. I don't know when it changed. It wasn't sudden. It was a slow, creeping thing. First fewer updates, then filtered versions, then silence. And suddenly even their pain became private, guarded from the woman who once wiped away every tear they dared to cry. I didn't call after I heard. I wanted to. My fingers hovered over the phone, heart pounding. But I didn't. I couldn't bear the sound of surprise in their voice, or worse, the indifference. I imagined them answering with a clipped "How did you know?" followed by an awkward pause, where love should have lived. And so I did nothing. I sat with the knowing raw and heavy and carried it alone. That's what it means to be truly left out, not just of events but of concern, of connection, of the sacred circle that forms when someone is hurting and wants you there. I used to be at the center of that circle. Now I don't even stand at the edge. It's a kind of grief that doesn't announce itself. There's no funeral for the death of closeness. No one brings casseroles when your child forgets to tell you they were ill. But grief, it is all the same. It settles in the bones in the soft, quiet spaces behind your eyes, where tears no longer fall, but still burn. I find myself talking out loud to no one sometimes, sitting at the kitchen table and saying things like "I would have come" or "You know I would have held your hand." I say them not because I think anyone hears, but because I need someone to say it, and if not them, then me. Because otherwise the silence starts to feel like a verdict, like I wasn't good enough, like I wasn't trustworthy with their pain. I used to pride myself on being the one they confided in. Not just their mother, but their confidant, their safe harbor. I didn't always have the perfect answers, but I had open arms and an open heart, and I thought that would be enough. I truly did. I thought if I showed up always with love and listening, they would never close the door. But they did, quietly, slowly, without malice maybe, but still they did. I try not to let bitterness in. I know they are adults now. They have their own circles, their own priorities. Maybe they didn't tell me because they didn't want me to worry. Maybe they thought they were protecting me, maybe. Or maybe they simply didn't think of me at all. That might be the hardest part, not knowing whether the silence is merciful or careless, whether it's rooted in love or in forgetting. I thought I had prepared myself for distance, for the natural way children grow up and out, but I didn't expect to become a stranger to their suffering. That's what breaks me, not being included in the joy that I could survive, but not being called when things are hard, that feels like being erased. And yet despite it all, I still worry. I still pray for them quietly before bed. I still light a candle on my nightstand, a little ritual I never told them about, and whisper their names to the flame. I still love them with a kind of softness that no silence can harden. That's the burden of a mother's heart. It continues to beat even in the void. They may not have called. They may never explain why. But I will always be the woman who would have come no matter the hour, no matter the storm, even if I had to find out from a neighbor. They used to say, "Only you understand, Mom." I can still hear it wobbly voices at the edge of tears or worn-out sighs after a long day, turning to me as if I were some kind of emotional compass. I didn't always know what to say, but I listened. That was the magic, I think. Not the fixing, but the listening. I made space for their hearts. I let them unfold in my presence without shame. And for a long time, that was enough. More than enough. Now I'm not even sure they hear my voice when I speak. They call less, and when they do, the conversations skim across the surface of things. Schedules, weather, headlines. I search for the familiar ache in their words, the invitation to go deeper, to peel back the layers, but it never comes. They say I'm fine, like punctuation, like a wall. And maybe they are. Or maybe they just don't trust me to hold the truth anymore. Maybe I've aged out of usefulness in their eyes. There's an emptiness in knowing that your voice, once sacred to them, has become background noise. I used to read them stories until they fell asleep, and they'd beg, "Just one more, please." Now I imagine they hit decline when they see my name flash on their screen, too tired or too busy for even a minute more. I don't blame them, not really. The world spins faster for them now. But I remember when it was me who spun their world, me, who held it steady when everything else trembled. I think what's most painful is how invisible the shift was. It's not like one day they sat me down and said, "We don't need you anymore." No, it was more subtle. First, they stopped asking my opinion. Then they stopped telling me when something important happened. And then, they just stopped including me at all. The roots I planted with such care have grown into trees with branches that no longer bend toward me. I wonder if they ever miss my voice. Not just the sound of it, but the way it used to wrap around them, like a warm blanket. I gave it so freely all those years, soft and firm, guiding and gentle, shaped by love and worn smooth by repetition. But now I only use it for myself, for the walls, for the quiet. I say things just to remember how it feels to be heard, even if no one is really listening. Sometimes when I can't sleep, I'll whisper their names in the dark, as if naming them aloud might conjure a connection like calling a child in a crowded mall. "I'm here," I say, though no one's asked. "I'm still here." I imagine them somewhere busy and bright, never knowing that their absence echoes louder than any words they've spoken. I remember the way one of them used to cry so hard they'd hiccup, and only my arms could calm them. They'd cling to me, like I was the only thing holding their world together. I felt powerful, needed not because I demanded it, but because they trusted me with their rawest self. Now I wonder where that version of them lives. Who holds them when the world breaks? Is it someone kinder, stronger? Or did they learn to hold themselves so tightly they no longer need to be held at all? It's a cruel truth when you do your job as a mother while they grow up and away. But there's a difference between independence and indifference. I don't want to be their crutch, but I didn't expect to be discarded with the scaffolding. There was a time when my advice was sought like scripture. They'd call frantic about a job interview, or a broken friendship, or a nagging feeling they couldn't name. What should I do, they'd ask. Just tell me what you think. And I'd think. I'd listen. I'd speak carefully, knowing that what I said would shape them. Now when I offer thoughts tentatively, lovingly, it lands like a pebble in a void. No ripple, no acknowledgement. Sometimes they even laugh gently, like I'm quaint. Outdated. Like my wisdom aged poorly. But wisdom doesn't expire. It deepens. It thickens in the quiet, takes root in the places no one sees. And though they may no longer turn to it, I still carry it. I still know things they haven't lived through yet. I still feel things they haven't named. I just no longer have anyone to share it with. I try to find grace in the silence. I remind myself they are living the lives I helped build, that maybe, just maybe, their quiet is a strange kind of peace I gave them. But some days it doesn't feel like peace. It feels like exile. And yet if they called right now, if the phone lit up with one of their names, I would answer before the first ring ended. My voice would be steady, ready. The years would collapse, and I would once again be the one who understands, even if they'd forgotten how to ask. Because some things don't fade. Some parts of love remain even when the line goes quiet. I've come to understand that motherhood for me was never about grandeur. It was about becoming what was needed. A coat in winter, a shoulder in heartbreak, a mirror when they couldn't see themselves clearly. I shifted and stretched myself into every shape they required. If one needed quiet, I became stillness. If one needed fire, I became heat. I don't think they ever noticed how much bending that took, how much of myself I folded away just to keep them whole. I used to think that was love. Maybe it still is. But there's something hollow about having been everything for everyone, only to realize no one ever asked who I was outside of that. I was the default, the given. the background music to their lives expected to play on without pause, even as the room emptied. There was a time not long ago when one of them visited briefly. It wasn't a planned visit. It was on the way somewhere else. They dropped in for 15 minutes. 15 minutes. They didn't sit. They didn't ask if I'd eaten. They didn't even look up when I tried to show them something I'd made, a scarf I'd been knitting. The colors chosen, because they used to love that shade. They just nodded and said, "That's nice," before checking their phone and saying they had to go. A goodbye kiss on the cheek light as air, and they were gone. The door clicked shut so quickly, I wondered if I'd imagined the whole thing. I stood there afterward holding that half-finished scarf, and I felt something shift. Not an explosion, more like a crack, down the center of something I didn't realize was already brittle. I wasn't angry, I was tired of giving things time, care, energy, into a void where nothing came back. I sat down and looked at my hands, these hands that had packed lunches, braided hair, cleaned scrapes, ironed shirts, held newborns, stirred soup, through fevers and flus and long nights, hands that had held so much for so long, and suddenly I wondered when was the last time someone held mine. It's strange how easily you can become invisible, even in a life you built, how quickly the things you gave become expected, then forgotten. I used to pride myself on being the strong one, the dependable one, the she-can-handle-anything one, but sometimes being that person means no one checks if you're okay. They assume you'll survive the silence, the forgetfulness, the hollow space where gratitude should be. And maybe I will, maybe I have, but surviving isn't the same as feeling loved. I remember one afternoon years ago, before all this quiet, when one of them looked at me across the kitchen table and said, "You're the strongest person I know." It meant the world to me. I stored that sentence somewhere deep like a seed, but seeds need watering, and there's been no rain in a long, long time. Now I wonder if they even believe that anymore, or if in becoming strong I became less human in their eyes, less in need of kindness, less deserving of it. I used to drop everything when they called. Work, rest, even meals. I didn't think twice. I'd go running heart first. But now that the calls have stopped, I've begun to notice how much of myself I set aside for them, how many books I didn't read, how many outings I declined, how many quiet cravings I silenced. And the truth is, I don't know what I like anymore. Not really. I was always their mom. That role swallowed everything else. My dreams, my voice, my time. I wore the label like a badge, proud and permanent. But now the name has faded from their mouths, and I'm left with a silence I don't know how to fill. I'm starting to learn slowly how to be with myself, to make tea and actually taste it, to put on music and dance even if no one's watching, to write down my thoughts, not so someone will read them, but just to hear my own voice again. It's shaky, but it's mine. I don't regret giving them everything. I really don't. I just wish they had noticed, not in grand gestures, just in a glance that lingered, a question asked, a hand held. I wish I had taught them not just to receive love, but to return it. Not out of obligation, but out of recognition. Because I was not just the woman who cooked and cleaned and listened. I was a person, am a person, one who laughed and cried and ached and dreamed, one who filled the gaps, held the weight, and now waits in the quiet. Maybe one day they'll remember. Maybe one day they'll look at their own children and understand. And when that day comes, I hope they feel a flicker of me, soft, steady, unconditional. But also I hope they learn to listen better, to love back louder. Because no one should have to wonder if they were ever truly seen. It started with one missed message in the group chat, then two. Then suddenly entire threads passed without me. I scrolled through watching photos, fly-by birthday dinners, silly jokes, Family updates all exchanged between my children as if I weren't there at all. My name was in the list, yes. The little circle with my picture sat quietly at the top, but no one spoke to me directly. No one tagged me, asked me how I was, or even acknowledged I had read anything. It was like I'd become a ghost with a number. Once upon a time, I was the heartbeat of that conversation. I was the one who checked in, who reminded them of doctor appointments, who noticed when someone went silent for too long. I was the one who sent little poems or silly memes just to make them smile. I poured warmth into every message, not because I was trying to be clever, but because I thought if I stayed present, truly present, they would too. But slowly they started answering each other more, and me less. My little good morning messages got likes, but no replies. My attempts to share were met with that flat, quiet emptiness that doesn't feel like rejection, but something worse, indifference. I remember one day vividly. I sent a photo of the garden my tulips had bloomed early that year, more vibrant than I'd ever seen. I thought they'd be delighted. I waited. Hours passed. Then a reply came not to me, but between two of them, about something unrelated, a vacation plan, a funny quote. My flowers sat there buried under pixels and scrolls unseen. I stopped sending things after that. It felt silly how much it hurt, but it did. That chat, that digital thread, had once been our lifeline. When they moved out, when the house became quiet, that little screen buzzed with life. It helped me pretend the distance didn't matter, that I was still connected, still included. Now it feels like a window I press my hand against, looking in on a world that once belonged to me. They still call it the family chat. The irony doesn't escape me. Once I tried to break the silence. I asked how everyone was doing. Simple, kind, just 3 words. No one responded. For 2 days, the chat stayed still. Then suddenly, it resumed with a meme from someone else. No reply to my question, not even a heart. I stared at my screen, blinking, unsure whether to laugh or cry. I wonder if they even realize what they're doing. I wonder if they think I'm fine because I haven't said otherwise, because I haven't begged to be seen. But mothers don't beg. We retreat, quietly, with dignity, until we become shadows that no one notices have vanished. I scroll through the old messages sometimes, the ones where they'd say, "Love you, Mom," at the end of every conversation. The photos they'd send of their meals, their pets, their children's drawings. They used to care what I thought, used to want me to see their lives unfold. Now I get curated versions, if that. I asked myself the other day, if I left the chat entirely, would they notice? Would anyone say, "Where did she go?" Or would my absence be absorbed like water into sand? There's a strange kind of grief in being technologically connected, but emotionally discarded. The phone still lights up, the app still loads, but there's nothing real waiting on the other side, just proof that I'm close enough to be watched, but too far to be welcomed in. I sometimes catch myself composing a message, something gentle, something real. "I miss you," maybe, or "Can we talk?" But the words feel heavy, risky. What if they don't answer? What if they say nothing at all? And so I stay quiet. I watch. I pretend. I press the heart emoji when someone shares good news. I say, "Congrats," when appropriate. I play the part of the proud, distant mother even when inside I feel like a forgotten note at the bottom of a drawer. I miss being the one they wanted to tell everything to. I miss the long texts at midnight, the phone calls that began with "I didn't know who else to call." I miss belonging to their lives not just as a figurehead, but as a voice, a presence, a person they chose. Now I'm just another notification. one they swipe away, one they'll reply to later but never do. Still I check the chat, still I read everything, still I hope, because part of me believes that one day someone will notice the silence and remember what I once meant to them. That I wasn't just the name at the top of the screen, I was the reason they had a screen to type on at all. I was the hands that first held the phone steady when they couldn't yet spell hello. And maybe, just maybe one day, they'll send a message just for me, one that says, "Are you okay, Mom?" And I'll say yes, even if I'm not, because the yes will mean they remembered. I baked the casserole exactly the way they liked it, extra cheese, the crust, just a little crisp at the edges, the way I used to make it when they were sick, or sad, or simply hungry for something familiar. It was muscle memory at this point. Chop stir season, pour bake. 35 minutes in the oven while I wiped down the counter, humming without meaning to, the way I always did when I was preparing something, with love. They hadn't asked for it, but I knew they were having a rough week work-stress kids home with a cold, a doctor's appointment that was making one of them nervous. I heard it in passing through someone else. They hadn't told me directly, but I pieced it together. That's what mothers do. Even when the updates stop, we stitch together clues from scraps. So I baked, and I wrapped it in foil warm and fragrant, and carried it across town. I rang the bell heart, fluttering the way it used to when I'd arrive at school pickup or a play performance, nervous and proud, waiting for their face to light up. But when the door opened, it was different. The smile was polite, surprised, but not warm. They took the dish with a murmured, "Thanks, you didn't have to," and stood there, not quite stepping aside, not quite inviting me in. I waited for the familiar words, "Come in, sit down, have some tea," but they never came. "I know you're busy," I said, smiling too brightly. "I just thought you might need something comforting." They nodded, said thank you again, but the door never opened wider. Behind them, I saw the life they live now, chaotic, colorful, full of motion, music playing from another room, a child's laughter, shoes scattered in the hallway. I was at the threshold of their world, but not part of it. And then the door closed. I stood there for a long moment, casserole scent lingering on my sleeves, wondering what just happened. Not because I didn't understand it, but because I understood it too well. That door had closed before, not always physically, but emotionally, slowly, over years. But this was the first time it had been so literal. I walked back to the car with empty hands and a heart too full of silence. I didn't cry, not then. I just sat behind the wheel and stared out at the driveway at the place I used to park for sleepovers and birthday parties and unplanned visits, where I'd be hugged before I'd even knocked. Now I needed an appointment, a reason, a warning. And even then the welcome was measured cautious, like letting in a neighbor, not a mother. The casserole had been a peace offering, a reminder, a little note written in butter and warmth that said, "I still know how to take care of you." But it had landed like an obligation, like something to be dealt with, not savored. I thought about calling the next day just to see if they liked it, but I didn't. I was afraid of the flat tone in their voice. The automatic, "It was good," that would tell me they had eaten it without thinking about me at all. There's a kind of loneliness that only exists at the doorstep of someone you raised. To be so close you can hear their lives, but not be invited in to witness them. To offer love that's met not with rejection, but with a quiet, courteous dismissal. A thank you, a smile, and a door. I kept telling myself maybe they were just busy. Maybe they didn't want the house to look messy. Maybe they were trying to protect their time, their space. I tried on all the excuses like coats that didn't fit. But deep down, I knew the truth. I was no longer someone they wanted to fold into their day. It's not that they don't love me. I believe they do. But love without presence is like sunlight through a window. You can see it, feel a bit of its warmth, but you can't touch it. You can't be held by it. That night I made a smaller version of the casserole for myself. I ate alone at the table with a glass of water and the sound of the clock ticking steadily behind me. It was good, familiar, but it tasted different somehow, like something meant to be shared now, diluted by the echo of what wasn't said. I still cook for them sometimes, quietly, just in case they stop by. I freeze things, label them, stack them neatly. I tell myself it's just in case, but I know it's more than that. It's a prayer in the shape of a meal, a message that says, I remember what you like, I remember you. Maybe one day they'll come hungry again, not just for food, but for me, for my stories, my voice, my warmth. And maybe this time the door will stay open. Sometimes I sit in my chair and listen to voices that aren't there. I don't mean hallucinations, I mean memories, echoes, the past replaying itself in corners of the house where silence now lives. I hear the laughter drifting down the hallway, the sound of feet thudding on wooden floors, the hurried, "Mom, are you home?" yelled without ceremony. I hear the way they used to say my name, bright, expectant, full of belief that I had the answer, the time, the care. Now the only voice I hear most days is the one in my own head, or the television talking to no one in particular. The phone sits quietly beside me like a sleeping pet, lifeless and loyal. I charge it each night, not out of necessity, but out of hope. A kind of ritual, maybe. If I keep it ready, someone will remember I exist. I called one of them last week, just once. It rang 6 times, then went to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I told myself they were busy, that they'd see the missed call and return it. But they didn't. Not that day, not the next. The silence stretched so long that even my hope gave up, tucked itself quietly behind my ribs, and whispered, "Stop reaching." Once I used to worry about bothering them. I'd hesitate before dialing, not wanting to intrude. But now, I don't hesitate because of politeness. I hesitate because I'm not sure they'll want to hear from me at all. I've become background someone they'll get to when they have time, if they have time. The cruelest part isn't the silence. It's remembering what their voices used to sound like when they needed mine. I can still hear it like old recordings playing in my chest. The vulnerability, the love, the dependency. I was their shelter, their soft place to land. And now I'm a missed call. They swipe away without thinking. There was a time when I couldn't even finish brushing my teeth without someone yelling from another room, "Mom, I need you." My name was a lifeline, tossed out a dozen times a day. Now it floats unused, gathering dust. I sometimes wonder if they've assigned someone else to that role, a partner, a friend, a therapist, someone who gets the version of them I no longer do, someone who gets the raw, unfiltered confessions that once belonged to me. I'm not angry about it, but I grieve it. Grieve the trust that used to be mine, the way their voices would drop when they were scared, and they'd say, "Don't tell anyone," but now I know nothing unless I hear it from someone else, or piece it together from social media posts, casual mentions, or the quiet intuition that something's wrong, that they're hurting, that they need someone, but it's not me anymore. There's a particular ache in knowing the people you would die for have stopped calling you to live through the little things with them. I used to be part of their every day. Now I'm reserved for holidays, and even those are starting to feel like obligations. I try to make peace with it, to believe this is how it's supposed to go. They grow up, they grow away. But no one tells you how lonely that distance feels, when it's not just physical, it's emotional, spiritual. like they built new lives and forgot to leave room for you in the blueprint. I sometimes pick up the phone just to scroll through our old texts, ones with hearts and smiley faces, and "Love you, Mom" at the end of every message. I reread them like old letters from a lost friend, proof that once my voice mattered, that once hearing from me brought them comfort. And when I can't sleep, I hold the phone in my hand, not because I expect it to ring, but because it still holds their names, their numbers. A fragile thread between us stretched thin by silence, but not yet broken. Sometimes I dial just to hear the line ring. I don't let it go to voicemail. I hang up before it picks up, just to remind myself I still can, that the number still works, that in theory we're still connected. In practice, I'm not so sure. They say we live in an age of connection. Everyone's only a click away, but no one talks about the pain of being this close to someone and still feeling so far, of seeing online now under their name but knowing they won't message, of sending a birthday text and getting back a thumbs up, a single blue check mark, cold mechanical acknowledgement in place of warmth. I'm learning not to expect much. That's the hardest part, to lower the bar so far that any scrap of attention feels like a feast. A 2-minute call becomes the highlight of the week. A thinking of you message becomes treasure. But even as I lower my expectations, I still remember what it felt like to be the one they turned to. I remember the urgency in their voices, the way they believed I could fix anything. And I remember how in their pain, they made me feel necessary. Now I'm not sure what I am. A memory, maybe. A relic of a time when they needed me more than air. Still, I answer every call, even the spam ones, just in case. It happened on a Tuesday, sometime in the early afternoon. I'd been feeling dizzy for days, nothing dramatic, just off. A heaviness in my chest like something was leaning on me from the inside. I don't usually go to doctors unless I absolutely must. I've always been like that. But something about that day felt different, like my body was whispering, "Call someone, now." So I did. I picked up the phone and called the first one, straight to voicemail. I tried another. No answer. The third rang 4 times before cutting off. I sat there, phone in hand, breath shallow, eyes staring blankly at the faded curtains swaying in the breeze. Not one of them picked up. Not one. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even surprised. I was still. Like something inside me had finally stopped spinning. It wasn't just about that moment. It was everything. The pattern, the build-up, the million other times I didn't call because I didn't want to bother them, and the one time I did it didn't matter. I didn't want to go to the hospital alone, but I did. I didn't tell them. What for? To say, "I'm here by myself because you didn't answer." That's not a conversation I had the energy for. I checked myself and quietly filled out the form, sat in a cold plastic chair under 2 bright lights surrounded by strangers who didn't know me. I was poked, prodded, scanned. Just a scare, the doctor said eventually. But good thing you came in. Good thing I came in. I smiled, thanked him, and walked myself back to the car. The sun was setting. The sky was streaked with pink and gold like a watercolor sigh. I sat there for a while, keys in hand, before driving home. The house felt different when I opened the door. Emptier somehow. Not because anything had changed, but because something inside me had. I didn't tell them. Not that night. Not the next day. A part of me wanted to test the universe to see how long it would take for someone to call. It took 4 days. When one finally did, it was casual. Light, just checking in. Been a while. How are you? And I said I'm fine. Not because I was, but because I knew they weren't calling to hear anything else. It's a strange thing learning not to expect rescue. When they were young, they believed I could save them from anything monsters heartbreak, even the dark. I became their light, their guardian, their first call. Now I've become an afterthought, an option, and sometimes not even that. I used to believe love meant showing up, dropping everything, racing to the hospital in the middle of the night just because a child sounded scared on the other end of the line. I thought that kind of love earned its echo, that it would come back to me in time, in kind. But it doesn't always. And that's what no one tells you, that you can pour everything you have into someone. Give them all your warmth, all your attention, all your years, and still end up in a cold waiting room, alone. I didn't tell my friends, the few I still keep in touch with. I didn't want pity. I didn't want the story to be about how sad I sounded. I wanted to hold on to the last thread of dignity I had left, the one where I still imagined myself a strong, independent whole. But the truth is, that day scared me. Not just the dizziness or the hospital, but the silence. The realization that if something had happened, if I hadn't come back through that front door, how long would it have taken them to notice? I thought about leaving a note, something simple. I was here. I waited. But I didn't, because part of me knows they're not ready to see what they've done. Or maybe they are, and they've just decided not to care. That hurts more. I've started to carry my phone with less urgency now, not because I'm giving up, but because I'm letting go. There's a difference. Giving up is despair. Letting go is clarity. It's understanding that people don't always love you the way you love them. That sometimes being someone's mother doesn't guarantee you a place in their present, only a blurry space in their past. But I'm still here, breathing, walking, making tea in the morning and watching the wind in the trees. And on the rare occasion, someone does call, I answer. Not because I'm waiting anymore, but because I remember what it's like to need someone, even when they don't remember what it's like to need me. They still say Mom, but it doesn't sound the same anymore. It used to be a name soaked in emotion, fear, love, joy, desperation, awe. Now it's almost procedural, like a title they're obligated to use, something functional, not tender. Like calling customer service and saying, "Ma'am," it lands in the air and drops flat without warmth or weight. The last time I heard it was over a video call. One of them needed help with a document, an insurance form they didn't understand. I was glad to help, truly. It gave me a reason to be needed, even if only for a few minutes. But the way they said, "Thanks, Mom," before hanging up, it didn't carry the softness it once did. No pause. No extra breath, no time for anything more than function. I stared at the black screen for a while, after the call ended, trying to remember the last time they said Mom with feeling. Maybe when they were teenagers and still tangled up in heartbreak and self-doubt. Maybe when they first moved out and realized the world was too big to carry alone. Maybe even when they were little and Mom meant safety, meant magic, meant home. I miss being home to someone. Not just the person who gave birth to them, but the place they returned to, the sound that soothed, the arms that held, the voice that steadied. I don't think they realize what it means when that identity dissolves, not just the role, but the relationship. You don't just lose closeness, you lose gravity. You become untethered. Sometimes I hear them say, Mom in passing in recordings or conversations with someone else, and I tilt my head like an animal, catching a familiar sound in the wild. For a split second, it pulls me toward something soft inside. But then it fades, and I'm reminded that even my name has become a habit instead of a haven. I used to say it to myself sometimes in the mirror. I'm their mom, like a sacred mantra, like a badge sewn into my skin. It made me stand taller. It made everything, every sleepless night, every sacrifice make sense. But now when I say it, it sounds hollow, like something I'm still trying to believe. And maybe I am. I never wanted to be worshipped. I never needed grand gestures. I just wanted to be seen, not as a duty, not as someone they should call, but as someone they wanted to call, someone whose name brought comfort, not obligation. I remember the day one of them told me, "You always know what to say." That sentence stayed with me for years. It got me through hard days, through moments when I doubted whether I'd done enough. Now I doubt something else entirely, whether they even remember who I was back then, whether that woman still lives in their memory, or if she's been replaced by a vague figure labeled Mom, nothing more. The other day I opened an old drawer and found one of their school assignments from years ago, a little essay titled My Hero. It was about me, crayon illustrations of me holding their hand, smiling at the dinner table, tucking them into bed. They wrote that I made the world feel safe, that I was the nicest voice in the dark. I folded that paper carefully and held it to my chest, not for nostalgia, but for validation, to remind myself that once I was that voice. I was the person they trusted most in the world. I don't need to be anyone's hero now. I just wish I weren't invisible. Sometimes I wonder what would happen if I stopped answering to Mom, if I let the silence speak instead, if I stopped responding to the name until it was spoken with care again, with meaning, with memory. But I know I won't, because despite everything when they say it, no matter how flat or brief I still come, I still soften, I still hope. Because Mom isn't just a word to me. It's a life I lived, a world I built, a name I earned in lullabies and fevered nights in scraped knees and whispered encouragements and decades of love that left me weathered but proud. So even if they say it like it's just a sound, I will hear what it used to mean. I will carry it like a melody only I know how to hum. And I will answer, not because they always deserve it, but because I remember what it meant to be someone's everything. And sometimes, that memory is the only warmth I have left. In the back of the hallway closet sits a little cupboard. Nothing fancy, just an old pine cabinet my husband built years ago when the kids were small and storage was scarce. Inside it are things I never told anyone I kept, little treasures that don't look like much unless you know what they meant, tiny crafts from elementary school notes, scribbled in haste, birthday cards signed with wobbly hearts, and gifts, so many gifts, all wrapped, all unopened. Every year I'd find something small for each of them, a bracelet I knew one of them would love, a book I thought another had mentioned in passing, a pair of gloves with little embroidery soft inside, perfect for cold fingers, that once used to cling to mine. I bought them, not because anyone asked me to, but because it made me feel connected, relevant, remembered. But somewhere along the way, the moments to give them disappeared. Plans changed. Visits got postponed. I'd ask gently, "When might you come by?" And they'd say, "Soon," with a smile that didn't reach their eyes. Things are just hectic right now. Always hectic. Always just out of reach. And so the gifts waited. Each year, I'd wrap them anyway, just in case. I told myself, this year, they'll come. This year, someone will knock on the door on a quiet afternoon and say, "I just wanted to see you," and I'd open the cupboard and say, "I have something for you." I imagine their surprise, their smile, the way they'd unwrap it with childlike joy and say, "You remembered." But no one came. One day last winter, I opened the cupboard to rearrange things. The oldest gifts were near the back, slightly dented from time. I held them in my hands, trying to remember what year they were meant for. Some I couldn't. I had lost track. They had all started blending into one long season of waiting. It hit me then the absurdity of it. A cupboard full of love wrapped and unseen, and not just material love, not just items, but care, attention, remembrance, all of it sitting there year after year, aging with me. I sat down on the floor beside the cupboard and unwrapped one of them. Just one. A small leather bookmark embossed with gold vines. I'd bought it for one of them who used to stay up late reading under the cover's flashlight, balanced between their knees. I remember watching the glow under the door, smiling to myself. I thought they'd love something elegant, something to match the reader they'd become. I ran my fingers over the surface and whispered, "I still remember what you loved." And then I cried. Not loudly, not bitterly, just the slow kind of crying that happens when your heart finally exhales. I left the bookmark out on the table that night beside a mug of tea. It felt like a companion, a witness to a kind of grief that has no funeral, the grief of love that had nowhere to go. They texted that evening, one of them. Just a short message. "Sorry I've been meaning to call. Things are crazy right now. Maybe this weekend." I stared at the screen. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I wanted to say, "It's okay, I miss you." I wanted to say, "There are presents waiting for you." I wanted to say, "Do you know how long I've been saving things just to have a moment with you?" But I didn't. I wrote, "No problem, hope you're doing okay," and left it at that. I've thought more than once of throwing the gifts away, or donating them, or burning them in some quiet ritual of release. But I haven't, not because I still expect them to be opened, but because they're proof. Proof that I cared even when no one noticed. Proof that I saw them, remembered them, loved them deeply, attentively, and without being asked. The cupboard remains full, each object a little story that was never told. I don't think they'll ever know what's in there. Not really. And perhaps that's the saddest part. How much love lives in secret. How many mothers keep silent shrines to children who no longer look back. If they ever do come one day, really come not just for a quick stop, I think I'd open the cupboard. I think I'd let them see what waiting looks like, what devotion looks like in cardboard corners and faded ribbon, what it means to prepare joy for someone who forgets to arrive. But until then, I let the cupboard be. I dust it gently. I touch the corners with care, because even unopened, those gifts remind me who I am. I am someone who remembers, someone who prepares, someone who loves quietly, patiently, without applause. And even if no one ever opens what I've wrapped, I'll know I gave something real. It was late, the kind of late where everything feels heavier. The air, the thoughts, the silence between rooms. I was sitting in the living room with the lights low, just the lamp by the window casting a dim gold over the armrest of the couch. The television was off. No noise, not even from outside. The whole world felt paused, suspended. And in that quiet, I whispered something I hadn't dared say out loud in years. "I'm sorry." Not to anyone in particular, not for any one thing, but for all of it, for being too available, for never saying no, for teaching them that I didn't need to be checked on, thought of, thanked, for every time I told them I'm fine when I wasn't, for setting a table without ever sitting at it, for giving and giving and giving as if love was something that shouldn't ask for anything in return. I don't think they ever meant to take me for granted, but I never gave them a reason not to. I made it too easy. I wanted to be the mother who was always there, the one who didn't complain, who handled everything. I thought that was strength. I thought that was love, and maybe it was. But now, all these years later, I can see the cracks the kind of love leaves behind. I didn't show them how to love me back. I made myself invisible in service of their needs, and now that they're grown, they've learned to look past me without even realizing it. It's not cruelty. It's conditioning. It's what I taught them. And for that, I am sorry. That night, I sat with my apology like a tired guest. It didn't leave me lighter, but it made something inside me feel more honest, more awake. I'd spent so long telling myself I was the victim of neglect, and in many ways I was, but I was also the architect of my own invisibility. I let the weight of everything fall onto me because I didn't want them to feel it. I carried it all, the bills, the appointments, the emotions, the burdens, while saying, "Don't worry, I've got it." And they believed me. Why wouldn't they? I look back now and see the moments I could have asked for help, could have said, "I need you," could have admitted, "I'm tired." But I didn't. I thought that made me a good mother. Maybe it did, but it didn't make me a whole person, and certainly not one they'd learn to care for. I think that's one of the deepest pains, realizing your children don't know how to care for you because you never showed them how. You never gave them the opportunity. Now I get little glimpses, a rushed call, a half-hearted question. "You doing okay, Mom?" And I always answer, "Yes, don't worry about me." The same script over and over. And whose fault is that? Mine, at least partly, maybe more than partly. That night, after I whispered that apology, I made myself a promise, not to become bitter, not to give up, but to begin asking, gently, softly, honestly. To say things like, "It would mean a lot if you visited," or "Can we talk this weekend?" Not demands, not guilt, just truth. Because love, even the quiet kind, deserves space, and I deserve to take up a little more of it. I know it won't change everything. I know they have their habits, their distance, their momentum. But maybe if I speak more clearly, they'll hear me differently. Maybe they'll begin to see me not just as Mom, the machine, the provider, the steady figure in the background, but as a woman with needs, with tenderness, with wounds. I don't want to shame them into remembering me. I want to invite them, and that starts with me remembering myself. I stayed up late that night writing a letter I haven't sent, a real one, with pen and paper, my handwriting shaky at the start but firm by the end. I told the truth about how I've felt, about how I miss them, about how I know I made mistakes too. I don't know if I'll ever send it, but just writing it helped. It reminded me I still have a voice, one that deserves to be used, not just to soothe others, but to speak for myself. Because silence when held too long doesn't make you strong. It makes you disappear. I don't want to disappear anymore. I don't need to be loud, but I do need to be real, present, seen. So I whispered, "I'm sorry," to the quiet that night, but I also whispered something else. "I'm still here," and I meant it. It didn't happen in a dramatic way. There was no slammed door, no shouted words, no final confrontation that marked my exit from their daily lives. Just a slow, soft vanishing like mist lifting from a field in the early morning, so quiet no one even notices it's gone, until the light feels a little harsher. I stopped texting first, just once to see. I told myself it wasn't a test, but maybe it was. I wanted to know what would happen if I didn't reach out, if I didn't say, "Good morning," or "How was your day?" or "Let me know if you need anything." A week passed, then 2. The silence stretched like taffy, long and thin and oddly sweet, because there was no disappointment, just confirmation. They didn't notice. And maybe that hurt more than anything else. Not that I was left behind, but that my leaving didn't even register. I had given so much of myself year after year, shaping my life around theirs, thinking I was indispensable. But it turns out I was simply available, and availability once assumed becomes invisible. So I made a quiet decision. I stopped. I stopped reminding them of things. I stopped asking about appointments, children plans. I stopped offering casseroles or hand-knitted scarves, or gentle advice wrapped in a soft tone. I didn't change overnight. I didn't become cold. I just let go. I didn't call on Sunday. I didn't send a birthday card early. I didn't answer their group chat with a cheerful emoji. And no one asked why. The world continued spinning exactly the same. That realization was shattering at first. It made my knees feel weak, like everything I'd built was nothing more than smoke. But once I let that grief settle, something unexpected happened. I felt calm, empty, yes, but peacefully so, like a room that's finally been cleaned out after years of clutter. I began to do little things for myself, not out of rebellion, but out of reclaiming. I drank tea from the good cup, the one I'd saved for guests. I opened the window at night and listened to the sound of crickets. I took long baths and used the nice soap, the lavender one I'd been saving for when someone visits. I wore the sweater they once said made me look too old, and I found I liked the way it hugged my shoulders, like it remembered my shape. And as I moved through the quiet, I realized I wasn't just letting go of them, I was returning to me. One morning I went for a walk before sunrise. The street was empty, the sky just beginning to turn pale at the edges. I stood at the top of the hill near my house and looked out over the rooftops, each one holding its own world of noise and love and distraction. I wondered if anyone else felt like this mix of grief and grace, of having loved too much and received too little, of still wanting to give, even when no one asks for it. I whispered again, "I'm still here," and it didn't sound like a plea anymore. It sounded like a truth, a soft declaration. They didn't notice I'd stepped back, but I did. I felt the shift in my bones. Not bitter, not spiteful, just done. Done waiting at windows, done chasing echoes, done trying to remind people that I exist. If they want to find me, they will have to reach. They will have to remember. And if they never do well, that will hurt. Of course it will. But it won't destroy me. Because I've spent too long shaping myself around their absences, and now I'm learning how to shape something else, a life that doesn't center around being someone else's afterthought. I will still love them, always. That kind of love doesn't go away. But I will not shrink for it. I will not pour into cups that never come back to be refilled. I am still here, just not where they left me.